There's a stack of envelopes sitting on your kitchen counter. You know exactly what's inside them, which is why you haven't opened them. A credit card statement, a utility bill, a medical invoice, maybe a car payment reminder with a bright red warning printed across the top. You tell yourself you'll deal with it tomorrow. Then tomorrow becomes next week. And eventually a question starts living rent-free inside your head. What happens if I just stop paying? Most people imagine the worst. A tow truck showing up before sunrise. A sheriff knocking on the front door. A lawsuit appearing overnight. Their bank account frozen. Their financial life collapsing all at once. But here's the strange thing. Almost all of those fears are based on a misunderstanding of how debt actually works. Because financial disasters rarely happen in a single dramatic moment. Instead, they happen through a series of deadlines, notices, penalties, waiting periods, legal procedures, and missed opportunities that unfold over weeks, months, and sometimes years. The reality is both less terrifying and more complicated than most people imagine. Today we're going to walk through exactly what happens when bills stop getting paid. Not in theory, not with scare tactics, but day by day, month by month, the way it actually works in America. My name is Theo, and I spend way too much time thinking about why so many hardworking Americans feel trapped by financial systems they were never taught to understand. And if you're someone who's worried about debt, rising costs, retirement, credit scores, or simply trying to stretch every paycheck a little further, consider liking the video and subscribing if this kind of practical financial breakdown helps make the world feel a little less confusing. The first thing most people don't realize is that not all debt is the same. In fact, there are 3 completely different categories. The first is unsecured debt. This includes most credit cards, many medical bills, and personal loans. The lender gave you money, but they don't automatically have the right to take specific property if you stop paying. The second category is secured debt. Car loans and mortgages fall into this group. The loan is attached to something valuable. Miss enough payments and the lender may eventually take back the asset. The third category is government debt. Federal student loans and tax obligations belong here. And these operate under an entirely different set of rules. Understanding those distinctions explains why some unpaid bills create phone calls, while others can eventually lead to wage garnishment. Let's start with the debt most Americans carry. Credit cards? Imagine a fictional person named Mike. Mike is 47 years old. He works in logistics outside Indianapolis. After a medical emergency and several months of inflation-driven expenses, he falls behind. He misses a credit card payment. At first, not much happens. The issuer charges a late fee. Interest continues accumulating. His account remains active. 30 days later, the missed payment may be reported to the credit bureaus. This is often where the real damage begins. His credit score starts falling. Not because collectors are chasing him, not because he's being sued, but because the reporting system now reflects increased risk. At 60 days late, many issuers impose penalty interest rates. The balance begins growing faster. At 90 days, the account enters serious delinquency. Collection efforts intensify. Letters arrive. Phone calls increase. At around 180 days, the account may be charged off. This doesn't mean the debt disappears. It means the lender treats it as a loss for accounting purposes. Often the debt is then sold. A debt buyer might purchase thousands of dollars in unpaid balances for pennies on the dollar. Then collection agencies begin attempting to recover as much as possible. This is usually the point where people imagine financial Armageddon. But the reality is that even after charge-off, there is still a process. Time passes, negotiations happen. Settlement offers appear. Nothing explodes overnight. Medical debt creates a different kind of fear. For many Americans, a hospital bill feels more frightening than a credit card statement, partly because healthcare costs can be enormous. But medical debt often behaves differently than people expect. In recent years, reporting rules have changed. Many medical debts receive additional time before appearing on credit reports. Smaller medical balances may not be reported at all under current standards. Hospitals frequently offer payment plans. Financial assistance programs exist at many nonprofit facilities. Collection activity can occur, but the timeline is often slower than people imagine. That's not an argument for ignoring medical bills. It's simply a reminder that panic rarely improves outcomes. Many people delay calling providers because they're afraid. Ironically, that fear often prevents them from discovering options that were available all along. Now let's talk about something much more dangerous than credit cards: car loans. Because unlike unsecured debt, a vehicle loan is attached to an asset, the car. If payments stop, repossession becomes possible. Exactly when that happens depends on state law and lender policies. Sometimes it's surprisingly fast. A borrower may fall behind for only a couple of months before serious repossession efforts begin. Here's where many people misunderstand the process. They assume losing the vehicle eliminates the debt. It doesn't. Suppose your remaining loan balance is $20,000. The lender repossesses the vehicle and sells it at auction. The car only brings $15,000. The remaining $5,000 may still be your responsibility. Plus fees, plus expenses, you lose the car and still owe money. That's why vehicle loans often create far greater financial damage than credit cards. The asset disappears while the debt survives. Utility bills create a different problem: electricity, water, natural gas. Most providers don't disconnect service immediately. There are notices, grace periods, payment arrangements. In many areas, winter protection rules prevent shutoffs during certain months. Some states provide additional consumer protections, but unpaid utility balances have a way of growing quietly. Late fees accumulate, past due balances roll forward. Reconnection fees may apply after service is disconnected. People often focus on large debts while underestimating utility obligations. Then one day they discover restoring service costs far more than maintaining it would have. Housing creates another major source of anxiety. Many renters imagine eviction happens the moment rent is late. In reality, the process is usually slower. A missed payment typically leads to notice requirements. The landlord must follow specific legal procedures. Court filings often come later. Hearings may be scheduled. Depending on location, weeks or even months can pass before physical removal becomes possible. That doesn't mean eviction isn't serious. An eviction record can create future housing challenges. But understanding the timeline matters. Fear tends to compress events into a single catastrophe. Reality usually unfolds step by step. And every step creates opportunities to communicate, negotiate, or seek assistance. Federal student loans belong to an entirely different universe. These debts aren't governed by the same rules as credit cards. Miss payments long enough and the loan may enter default. Once that happens, consequences can become more powerful. Wages may eventually be garnished. Tax refunds can be intercepted. Certain federal benefits may be affected. Yet even here, there are often rehabilitation and repayment programs designed to help borrowers recover. The government has tools private lenders don't possess. But it also provides pathways that private lenders often don't. Understanding both sides of that equation is important. Then there's the IRS, perhaps the most feared creditor in America. And for understandable reasons. The IRS has extraordinary collection authority. Failure to file penalties. Failure to pay penalties. Interest accumulation. Tax liens. Bank levies. Wage garnishments. In some situations, passport restrictions. The IRS isn't powerful because it moves quickly. It's powerful because it can continue pursuing collection for a very long time. The good news is that payment plans exist. Hardship programs exist. Settlement options exist for some taxpayers. The worst approach is usually avoidance. The IRS tends to be more flexible with people who communicate than with people who disappear. At this point, many viewers are probably wondering about debt collectors. Let's clear up some myths. Collectors cannot simply call you every hour. Consumer protection laws place limits on their behavior. They generally cannot harass you. They cannot threaten actions they have no legal authority to take. And perhaps most importantly, there is no debtor's prison in America. People are not sent to jail simply because they owe money. Could a collector sue? Yes, that happens. But even lawsuits follow procedures. Notifications, court filings, deadlines, judgments. The process takes time. Again and again we see the same pattern. Fear imagines instant destruction. Reality unfolds through calendars. One of the strangest corners of the debt world involves what's often called zombie debt. Old obligations that seem to come back from the dead. Every state has statutes of limitations that affect how long creditors can sue over certain debts. Once that period expires, the debt may become legally harder to enforce through lawsuits. But here's the trap. Sometimes consumers accidentally restart the clock. A small payment. A written acknowledgement. An agreement made without understanding the consequences. Debt buyers know this. That's why old debts sometimes reappear years later. Whenever dealing with very old obligations, understanding your state's rules becomes incredibly important. Because one conversation can change the legal status of an account. Now let's talk about credit scores. The topic people often fear most. Suppose two individuals each start with a FICO score around 760. One misses a single payment. The score drops significantly. Another experiences a repossession. The damage is deeper. Someone filing bankruptcy may see an even larger decline. Yet here's the part rarely discussed. Credit scores recover. Not instantly, not effortlessly, but consistently. Millions of Americans have rebuilt credit after late payments, after collections, after repossessions, even after bankruptcy. The financial system has a surprisingly short memory compared to human emotions. Many people carry shame for years after their reports have already begun healing. And that brings us to the most practical question of all. What should someone do when there simply isn't enough money to pay every bill? Because sometimes that's the reality. Not irresponsibility, not recklessness, just math. When resources are limited, priorities matter. Housing comes first. Rent or mortgage payments protect the roof over your head. After that come essential utilities. Electricity, water, heat, the services that make daily life possible. Next are secured loans tied to essential assets, particularly vehicles needed for work and transportation. After that come taxes and government obligations. Their collection powers are simply too significant to ignore. Finally come unsecured debts like credit cards and many personal loans. Not because they don't matter, but because their immediate consequences are often less severe than losing housing, transportation, utilities, or facing government enforcement actions. That order isn't about morality. It's about risk management. It's about protecting the systems that keep your life functioning. The most important thing to remember is this. Debt is rarely a single disaster. It's a collection of timelines. Different debts move at different speeds. Different creditors have different powers. Different consequences arrive on different dates. The people most damaged by debt are often not destroyed by the debt itself. They're destroyed by fear. Fear prevents phone calls. Fear prevents negotiations. Fear prevents learning the rules. Fear convinces people that catastrophe has already happened when, in reality, they're still standing near the beginning of the calendar. And once you understand the calendar, you regain something powerful. You regain choices. Because the monster under the bed was never really a monster. It was just a schedule. And schedules, unlike monsters, can be understood. If this video helped replace fear with understanding, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Theo Invests, and share it with someone who may be carrying financial stress alone. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can give another person isn't money. It's clarity.